Welcome to BBC News, broadcasting to viewers on public television in the US and around the globe. Our top story, 2 apartment buildings are torn apart by an explosion in New York City.
Live from our studios in Singapore and London, this is BBC World News. It's Newsday.
I'm Daniela Ritorto in London. Welcome back to Outside Source here on BBC World News. I'm Daniela Ritorto. Our top story. Prosecutors in South Korea have requested an arrest warrant for the captain of the sunken ferry. At a very basic level, the understanding has always been, hasn't it, that the Taliban don't really have much truck for Islamic State and their particular methods and ideology. Charlie Hebdo was a known target. They had a police officer outside of the office. There were a couple of lone wolf attacks in the last few months, so there were troops on French streets. What more can you do? Did those undertakings ever describe moves towards democratic elections as you and I would see them here in the UK?
After Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Well, let's get more on this from my colleague Daniela Ritorto, who's with the BBC's Russian service. And Daniela, over to you.
In your research, do you believe that some countries perhaps just aren't cut out for democracy? Or is this a question of institutions and that this takes time? Thank you for joining us. Well, in a dramatic finish to the UK general election, Prime Minister David Cameron confounded the pollsters and won a second term in office with an outright majority. He's promised to deliver on his campaign pledges, including a referendum on Britain's membership of the European Union. The economic advisor to Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel, thank you very much for joining us. Why did your government reject Greece's offer so quickly yesterday, especially when some people in Brussels quite liked it? Hope you can stay with us here on BBC World News. Still to come, we have to talk, unfortunately, about what's been happening. Look at Chris, he's just ready. You promised me, Chris, no sledging when I talked to you earlier today. Go on, get on with it. Let's talk about the Ashes.
Well, sweet dreams, Australia.
This is SBS World News with Ricardo Gonçalves and Daniela Ritorto.
The Kremlin denies it has compromising information about Donald Trump, labelling reports of a dossier a hoax designed to damage US-Russian relations. Mr. Trump's nominee for US Secretary of State has come under scrutiny over his ties to Russia at his confirmation hearing.
Before departing, the Prime Minister sat down exclusively with SBS News.
Just before takeoff, the Prime Minister told SBS News he had to make this trip despite the terrible pre-budget timing. He did give you that ear bashing on the phone. This is the same president who refused to shake the hand of the German Chancellor. It underlines the unpredictability of the Trump administration. Foreign policy certainties can be turned on their head overnight by a president who's shown he is willing to act unilaterally.
From the Peruvian capital, here's our chief political correspondent, Daniela Ritorto.
When this city last hosted APEC in 2008, there was a bush in the White House and a Rudd in the lodge. A seat at the table with all 10 ASEAN leaders. It's something that's been on Australia's diplomatic wish list for decades. But as we've seen with these summits, most of the action, most of the real talks will happen on the sidelines.
Our chief political correspondent, Daniela Ritorto, is travelling with the Prime Minister.
Well, while Malcolm Turnbull was at the APEC opening ceremony last night here in Da Nang with Presidents Trump and Xi and Putin, now is when this week-long tour of Asia shifts from trade to security, the East Asia Summit in Manila. There's a real Australia First theme, I'd suggest, to this budget. Some of these measures, the levy on temporary foreign workers, banning foreigners from buying up more than 50% of developments, a tax on empty properties held by foreigners, making migrants wait years longer for the pension. Don't you risk sending a real, people aren't welcome to Australia message with this? I think they've been very clever here in terms of the politics. Think about everything that Labor has kind of bashed the government on over the last few years. Who's been ruled out? Barnaby Joyce, Scott Ludlam, Larissa Waters, Fiona Nash, Malcolm Roberts. The 2 that are safe, Matt Canavan and Nick Xenophon. Welcome to the corridors of Parliament House, where there is an almighty party happening behind me. And that's the world this Tuesday. We'll have news updates throughout the evening and another bulletin at 10:30 on SBS.
And of course, you can get all of tonight's stories online and news around the clock at our website, and you can follow us on Twitter. Good night.
Good night.